Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today I'm going to be kitbashing a bot. Now this is highly inspired by Bill Making Stuff's BeadBots, but it's not going to be a complete scratch build because I've got a Warhammer miniature which I want to recycle. There's definitely going to be non-Games Workshop parts in here though, and I'm going for a really rusty, really dinged up cyberpunk aesthetic. I was working with some kids in an after school club that I run where we used the Warhammer Alliance box set, which is really great if you're part of a school or a club. Highly recommend it. But it comes with lots of sprues that let you build Necron warriors and space marines. You can see the space marine here has been built already, but the Necron warrior, while the kids were making it, they managed to lose his head. So we've got the other parts on the sprue here, but essentially we cannot build a Necron warrior given what's left here because he's missing his head. So we're going to have to kitbash something. So first of all, I'm going to cut all of these pieces off the sprue. With all the pieces off, minus the head of course, I'm not going to need this bit of the body because I'm going to give him a completely new body, so I can get rid of that. And then I don't really want to use any of the body at all, so I'm going to take these and we're going to cut off the legs, get rid of them, and we're only going to use these legs, and I'm going to cut these down even further, and we're going to make this gun look like something that doesn't look like this. We're going to change it about a bit, so just that it looks rather different and it's not obviously a Necron gun. And normally the way that this kit is supposed to be constructed, so that this arm here holds this handle, this goes into the back of the gun here. So if I'm not using this handle and not connecting it up like this, I'm going to have to cover up this hole. I'm going to use my sprue cutters to separate the legs, then get rid of a lot of the excess material around the hip joints, because I want this to be smooth and flat so I can join it to its new body. I'm going to whittle that down more with my hobby knife. I'm going to get rid of the handle so it looks like he's just holding his hand in a normal fist. And then I'm going to cut down the barrel of the gun so that it's much shorter, it looks different, and it's more like a kind of 1950s style ray gun. And of course that will need tidied up, whittled down a little bit with the hobby knife. To cover up the hole in the back of the gun, I'm going to use one of these half pearls, which I got from Hobbycraft, and you can see these come in all different sizes. They're really great for modelling. A little bit of super glue and you can't see that hole at all. After tidying up the barrel a little bit, I'm one of those people who likes to drill the barrel. So I'm using my pin drill just to hollow it out. It's a very small detail, but I really think it does look good. Now the next bit unfortunately didn't film properly, but I've just taken a simple wooden bead and super glued the arms into the holes that run through that bead. Now I want this to be a simple design, but I want a little bit extra detail on there. So I've taken a resin motor from my bits box, and this was produced by Hayland Wargames for Gaslands, and I'm super gluing that on the back after I've hollowed it out a little bit with my Dremel. Now I want a really simple flat head inspired by L337 from Solo, so I'm just using a plastic button that I raided from my wife's sewing box. The fact that it's got an indented circle in the bottom means it's going to fit really nice and flush with that sphere. Just want a single eye on there, this time inspired by BB-8, so again I'm just using one of those half pearls and super gluing it on. These are really versatile. It's time to start tidying it up, so I'm going to use some Milliput. You can of course use green stuff, but Milliput is my go-to. This is a 2-part epoxy putty, and you can smooth it out just with water. Push that into the joints around the arms, and then you can start blending it in with a hobby knife blade or any other tools that you've got. If you can fit them in, then your fingers are actually one of the best things that you can use for this. I'm just going to fill around the motor to blend that into the rest of the body and cover up those buttonholes in the head. Once dry and sanded, you'll never see them. I want a kind of dieselpunk aesthetic to this, so I'm taking the Necron gun, cutting down the barrel, and then using that as a kind of chimney stack on the motor where the fumes and the gases and the smoke's going to come out. Now I'm going to attach the legs to the base that this Necron model came with. Now that does present a couple of problems, but you can see one of the feet is actually sculpted onto the base. I could try to cut it off of the base and then attach it to the leg, but it's so flat and fiddly, I think that's just going to be a bit of a nightmare. So the legs are just attaching to the base as they were supposed to. That is going to present a bit of a problem though, because the space between the legs at the hips is going to be too narrow for the width of the ball body. So once this glue is dried, we're going to have to bend those legs and reshape the top of the hips a little bit more so that they fit flush to the body. But once widened, those can be super glued into the correct position and then any gaps filled with more milliput. Once dry, it can be hit with some primer. You can see the body and head look very, very plain. Now I could add lots more greeblies to this and give a lot more detail, but I want this to be really plain. That's part of the aesthetic that I'm going for. All of the detail is going to come through the paint. When I'm painting, I generally like to lay down all of the base colours across the entire model first and then go in and do all the detail work and the shading. The base colours generally take 2 or 3 thin layers in order to get a good even coat, and if I make any mistakes, get paint onto different areas where it shouldn't be, then it's much easier to touch up just a base coat rather than having to touch up and blend back in something that has had washes or dry brushing applied to it. For this colour scheme, I'm drawing inspiration from heavy construction equipment, so there's a lot of orange and black in here, with the pistons, joints and back motor being painted as unprotected metal. The ray gun is going to get a similar black and silver paint job, but with some bright blue, which is going to really draw the eye, and that's going to show the plasma energy that this futuristic weapon uses. I'm going dieselpunk, but I want a little bit of steampunk, so I'm using a brass colour in here as well. And the eye really needs to stand out, so I'm using a nice ominous red for it. With all of the base details down, he's looking factory fresh, but missing dimensionality, shading and detail. And with this guy, I want him to look really, really weathered. Before working on the weathering, I want one last detail, which is going to be this little stripe on his head. A little bit of masking tape and some dry brushing off the black, and it's not too stark. And now it's time to get him really dirty and grungy, because this guy has really been around a lot and been through the wars. He's got a lot of oil and a lot of grime on him. For this, I'm using Citadel paints with Reichland Flesh Shade over the top of the orange and the brass, and Known Oil over the top of the black and the exposed silver metal. To bring out the depth of the plasma coils, I'm using Drakenhof Nightshade. With the glossy tone of that nightshade once it's dry, he does look a bit like a walking gumball at the moment. So we're going to take that orange that we used for the base colour and dry brush it back over the top, which will take off that sheen and add some more weathering. And the black will get hit with a dry brush of a dark grey to bring out the highlights and make it look more three-dimensional. The bare silver metal also gets some highlights of that base colour, just so it really pops against the depth that we've added with that wash. And a couple more highlights with the plasma blue and a nice brighter red on the eye. Now my thinking is that all of the really important components for this guy are inside his body, which is why there's no external greeblies or really interesting details. His body is a really hard armoured shell in order to protect all of his systems. That said, all of his armour that's been painted in oranges and blacks by his manufacturers is going to get really, really scraped up and chipped. To show that, I'm taking my base colours, mixing them with white to get a lighter tint, and then painting on some chip patterns all over the body, particularly concentrating on the edges of those armour pieces. Once all those chips have been painted on, I'm then taking a dark grey and going in and painting inside of those coloured chips with this dark grey in order to show the exposed metal underneath. So this is an even deeper layer, even though it's painted on top. Now you could use a metallic silver colour for this, but I found that it catches the light too much and it's actually too shiny, which catches the eye too much and just doesn't quite look right at this scale. With the chips all finished, I've then used some agrax to add some more grime, just thinly painting on some streaks where oil or grime has run down his body, particularly from where it's collected underneath his head or around his joints. It's then time to punch up that eye a bit more by painting on some white light reflections and then add some satin varnish for good measure. To finish everything off, I need to do the base, and obviously this is one which has been pre-sculpted with stones and elements added to it. Now that does mean that this robot is going to look out of place if it's used in a war game in an internal setting, for example on a space station. It is what it is though, so I'm really going to have to lean into that. And I can actually see this robot being in a dystopian setting, stalking through some destroyed urban landscape. In this setting, humans have been dead for a long time and everything is overgrown. The final little detail I'm going to add is a wisp of smoke coming out of that diesel motor's chimney, and this is just a little bit of cotton teased from a cotton bud and then pulled into shape. And with that we have the finished droid. Dirty, grimy, banged up, scraped, dented. This guy has taken a licking and keeps on ticking. In fact, I enjoyed making this guy so much I made another one. Yes, the kids in my after school club wrecked another Necron model, and instead of letting it go to waste, I decided to recycle it, giving him a completely different colour scheme and a slightly different motor backpack. This one with an aerial so he can communicate with others. And to be honest, I think I actually prefer the blue and yellow colour scheme on this guy. I hope watching this build has inspired you to try and make something similar. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time with more on Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.